Defender for Office 365 is a robust email security solution, but how do you configure it? Well, that's the topic for today's video. But before we start, a quick introduction as always. My name is Jonathan Edwards and I'm a business IT consultant from Yorkshire in the UK. We help clients with their IT support, their Microsoft 365 and their cyber security. So please do me a quick favour. If you get any value from this video, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Now, if you're a regular viewer of my YouTube channel, you will have seen recently that I've created quite a few videos on Microsoft 365, and in particular, Defender for Office 365. But in none of those videos have I shown you how to configure it. But that is exactly what we're going to do today. In a moment, I'm going to hop onto that computer behind me and you can watch over my shoulder how to configure Defender for Office 365. Now, this video is a bit longer than usual, but hopefully it's packed full of value. But before we get into all that, let's have a quick recap on Microsoft 365 email security. So with any Microsoft 365 mailbox that you get some level of security. Now, this is called Exchange Online Protection. You get anti-spam, anti-phishing, and anti-malware. But Microsoft do have a more advanced product. In fact, they've got two more advanced products. The product itself is called Defender for Office 365, and it comes in two flavors, Plan 1 and Plan 2. Now, fortunately for small businesses, and when I talk about small businesses, I mean companies with fewer than 300 employees, Defender for Office 365 Plan 1 is included with Microsoft 365 Business Premium. Win-win. So what advanced features do you get in Defender for Office 365 that you don't get in Exchange Online Protection? Well, you get more aggressive phishing protection. You get impersonation protection, which protects your company against cyber criminals trying to pretend to be someone else. Naughty, naughty. You get something called safe attachments, which protects your email, your Microsoft Teams, and your SharePoint against dodgy attachments. And you get another feature called safe links, which is a bit like safe attachments, but it protects your company against dodgy links. So if a cyber criminal sent you a phishing link and they wanted you to click on it, hopefully safe links would kick in and tell you it's a bit naughty. But without further ado, let's jump on the computer behind me and let's configure Defender for Office 365. Now, today's video, we're going to be focusing on Defender for Office 365 Plan 1. So let me show you how to configure Defender for Office 365. The first thing you need to do is log into the 365 portal, which has admin access. And you'll know that because you can see the admin tab here. So we'll click on admin and we'll go into the 365 admin portal. From here, we want to go into the security portal itself. So it's the security admin center. So click on show all and you can see the admin centers down here. We want to go into the security admin center. Now you can see we've got lots of options down this side here. So we've got endpoints, which is the Defender for endpoint, but then we've got the email and collaboration, which is where we administer the Defender for Office 365. So we want to go into policies and rules, and then we want to go into threat policies. So you can see now we've got a lot of options. We're going to start talking about the preset security policies in a moment, but just focus your attention for a moment on the policies section here. So the anti-phishing, the anti-spam and the anti-malware, they're all included with the Exchange Online Protection. So that's what you get with every Microsoft 365 mailbox. We've also got some safe attachments and some safe links. Now these are premium features of Defender for Office 365. If I just compare this admin portal to one of our customers' admin portals who doesn't have Defender for Office 365 licensing, you can see it says next to these features premium. So if you see anything like this, it means you've not got the correct licensing for Defender for Office 365. So we'll minimize that and go back to our main portal. So within Defender for Office 365, there are two ways that you can configure your policies. There's a really easy way and there's a slightly harder way. So let's first start talking about the really easy way, and that is by using the preset security policies. So you've got standard protection and you've got strict protection, and they are both, really as the name implies, you get a standard level of protection and you can get a strict level of protection. Now what you can do, you can add all the company into standard protection, Or you can be a bit more granular. So you might decide to add most of the company into standard protection, but then you might add the finance department into strict protection because there's more protection over their emails. Now it's important to get the balance right because with strict protection, more emails will be trapped in the filter, more will get caught, and there might be a few false positives. Now you might be wondering, what settings am I turning on here? So I turn on strict protection and I add all the company into that. What do the settings look like? Well, fortunately, Microsoft do publish them. So it's on this web page here and it's under their recommended settings. So you can scroll down and you can see here. So Exchange Online Protection Anti-Spam Policy settings. These are all the settings and these are the settings that come with each of the standard and the strict policies. So you, if you're interested, can look through all these and you can decide if all these settings match your company needs. So if these settings do match your company needs, or you just want to get some protection on as quickly as possible, you can go back here and you can start switching these on. So we switch standard protection on. And then we click on Manage Protection Settings. So the first options it's going to give us is the Exchange Online Protection. So that obviously includes the anti-spam, the anti-malware, the anti-spoofing. Who do we want to apply this standard protection policy to? Simply, we can choose it as all recipients, we can choose some recipients, or we can choose all recipients but exclude some users, some groups, or some domains. Once we're happy with that, we can simply click on Next. And then we're getting into the Defender for Office 365 protection. So this is the advanced protection that Defender for Office 365 gives you. So who we're choosing here? Well, to make it easy, we can just click on previously selected recipients, which would choose the same recipients that we selected in an Exchange Online Protection, or we can configure it slightly differently. We then click on Next, and then we get into the impersonation protection. So impersonation is when a cyber criminal pretends to be someone else. They might pretend to be your financial director and they'll send you an email asking you to pay. So they are impersonating someone else. So we can click on Next here, and it says here, add people such as top level executives and board members. So it's key people within the business. So I would simply add Boris Johnson in here, type in Boris, and I want Boris to be protected by impersonation. But with your organisation, you can go through and add all the senior management and people who are more likely to be impersonated by cyber criminals. And then we move on to protected custom domains. So as it says here, these domains could be ours or they could belong to key suppliers who we have a lot of email correspondence with. And again, sit down with your team and work out which key suppliers and partners you use and add your own domain into here as well. That's important. So click on that and we can add that in. Okay, click on Next. And then if we've got any trusted senders, so again, who do we correspond with all the time? We don't want to switch this on and people who we have regular email contact with just can't email us. It keeps getting stuck in spam. That's just going to cause a lot of frustration. So work out which senders you send and receive to on a regular basis. And then we can click on Next and then we can simply switch it on. So we might just leave it there. We might say, well, everybody in the business is going to have standard protection. Or we can say, most people in the business are having standard protection, but we want these certain individuals to have strict protection. So we go on to strict protection, and it's a similar kind of layout. So who are we applying this to? Well, I'm going to apply this to Boris, okay? Now, you might have noticed that I've added Boris as well into the standard protection. So what's going to happen because we're adding them into two different groups? Well, strict protection will take precedence. So if you add a user into strict and standard, it's the strict one which will take precedence, okay? So whatever settings I set for Boris in strict will be the settings that I use for Boris. And as you can see, it's exactly the same layout. We go through it as we need to go through it. The only difference is it's the settings. So the strict and the standard are just slightly different in places. So strict is 5, standard is 6. You can work out which ones suit your business. So back to here, we click on Next and we go through it all, and then we would switch that policy on. Click on Done. So that's the easy way to do it. You know, you've got standard protection on and you've got strict protection on. Now, there's a bit of a problem for me with these security policies, these preset ones. They're not very granular, so there might be some of these settings that I don't agree with. So I might look at the EOP anti-spam and I might think, well, that's okay, but I don't like that, and I don't like that. And unfortunately, you can't change individual settings. They're just preset policies that are made by Microsoft. So what we do for our customers is we create these policies individually, and it's not that hard to do. So let's have a look and let me show you how to do that. So firstly, let's go here, and I'm just going to switch these off. So let's take a look at how to create our own policies. The first thing we'll do is we'll go back to policies and rules. Now we're going to start with the anti-phishing policy, but before we do that, we're just going to configure the quarantine policies and all will become clear. So the quarantine policies are the type of access that our end users have over their quarantine. So what can they do when things are stuck? So the first thing we're going to do, and as I said, all this will become clear throughout this video. So we'll call this the JE Tech quarantine policy. Okay, and we'll click on next. So we've got two options here. We've got limited access and we've got set specific access. Let me show you the difference between the two. So if we go onto here, it will become clear. So select the release action preference. Click on the drop down, we can see two options. So we've got allow recipients to request a message to be released from quarantine, or allow the recipients to release a message. So they're very different, these. If something gets caught in the quarantine, with the top option, recipients can request that the IT department take a look at it and release it. With the second option, the user can release it themselves. So it depends, again, what level of trust you have in your organization. It's worth pointing out as well, you can have more than one quarantine policy. You can apply different ones to different groups. So if you've got a department who are developers, for example, and they're always getting things trapped in the filter, you might want to set a policy for them so they can release their own, otherwise they're going to get frustrated. That is the only difference, these settings here, between the limited access and the set specific. So if I choose it as limited, click on next, click on enable the notification, click on next, and then it gives you a review here. So what can recipients do with this limited access? Well, they can request to release the message from quarantine, they can block a sender, they can delete the message, or they can preview the message and the notification is enabled. So their notification message will look something like this. They'll receive one of these each day. If we go back and we configure it using the set specific, we can say, actually, I want people to control their own quarantine. I trust them. That's up to you. So what additional options can you select? Well, they can delete the message out of the quarantine, they can preview it, and they can block the sender. Okay, click on next. Quarantine's enabled, and you can see the only difference here is that people can actually release the messages from their own quarantine. Click on submit, and that will set the quarantine policy up for us. Click on done. Once you've created the policy, you can see there's another tab here called global settings, and this gives you some more quarantine notification settings that you can add. You can choose your own subject for your organization. You can choose your own display name, a disclaimer, which language, and you can also use your company logo, which is quite handy. So people might think it's from your business. And how often do you want people to get a notification? And you've got all these options here. We always choose one because we want people to get one every day. We can just simply click on that and save those global settings. Okay, so let's go back to threat policies. Now we've got our quarantine policy in place. We're going to start configuring these policies here, and we're going to start with the anti-phishing policy. So you can see you've got the strict and standard that are available in the preset, and these are both switched off. And then there's a default one as well that Microsoft has created, but we're going to create our own. So we'll click create, and we'll call it JE Tech Anti-Phishing Policy, APP. Click on next. Again, who do we want to add into this policy? We can be quite granular. I just want to add everybody who is using this domain. This is our main domain. If you've got more domains in your business, add them all here. If you want specific groups or users, you get the idea. Or if you want to exclude some people from this, you can as well. Click on next. The first policy at the moment is the phishing threshold. So which do we set it as? The default one here is standard. We've then got aggressive, we've got more aggressive, and we've got most aggressive. So which one is the right answer for you and your business? Well, the answer is I don't really know about your business and I don't know which is going to be right. What we always recommend is that people start with standard. Much of these policies with Defender for Office 365 is putting them in place and then tweaking them. So you don't want to set this as aggressive and get lots of things trapped in the policy. You're just going to create frustration for your end users. So we always start it at this, and if we see people are getting phishing emails, then we'll look to tweak the settings. Now the impersonation is, as we discussed with the preset policies, we can enable certain users. So I'm going to go in here and add Boris Johnson because he needs protecting from, well, himself. Click on that, click on add, and you can add as many users. Well, you can add 350 users into there. So click on done. And then you can add the domains to protect. So again, add your domains into here. So again, this is what we did with the preset policies. We just having to do this manually because we're creating the policy from scratch. It's also a good idea here. We've got enable mailbox intelligence and enable intelligence for impersonation protection. This is AI, and I think it's well worth having on. It will probably reduce the number of emails that you're getting stuck in your filters. And also enable spoof intelligence. You might be using different systems to send email. You might be using things like MailChimp, for example, that sends email as you. So you can configure all those in the allow block list, but it's a good idea also to have the spoof intelligence switched on. We click on next. And now we're talking about the actions. So if Microsoft 365 catches these messages, what do you want them to do with it? So if a message is detected as user impersonation, we've got a lot of options here. We can redirect it to a different email address, maybe the IT department. We can move the message to the junk email folders. We can put it in quarantine. We can deliver a message, but maybe add the IT support one in the BCC so they get a copy. We can delete it, or we can do nothing. So again, it depends on your organization. A lot of organizations choose to quarantine the message. For us, we're an IT company. We do cyber awareness training. We like to trust the people in our business. So what we tend to do is move these messages to the junk folder. But again, it's up to you. The same with mailbox intelligence. What do you want it to do? We've got the same options. If the message is a spoof, what do you want it to do? You've just got a couple of options here. Click on quarantine that message. And because we've chosen a quarantine message here, so if we choose a quarantine here just to show you, it's then going to ask us what quarantine policy we want to take effect. So if you remember the previous step, we created this JE Tech. So this is where it comes in here, okay? So all those settings we chose, the user can block the sender, release the message, etc, etc. So that is where you would choose that if you didn't want it to go to the junk. So there, we'll choose that as well. There's some tips here which I switch them all on because I think it's quite handy. Things like if someone sends an email and their email address has never sent us an email before, there'll be a warning at the top of the email. These are just all tips, a little bit of cyber awareness training to make sure everybody in your business is aware. These little things can make a big difference. Click on next, and that's it. So we can submit that. And the anti-phishing policy has been created, and we've created it ourselves. So we're going to go back to our policies, and the next one we're going to do is the anti-spam. So we've got some policies here. We've got the strict and the standard, which of course are switched off, and then we've got some default ones. We've got an inbound, an outbound, and a connection filter. So we're going to create our own inbound anti-spam policy. We're going to call it JE Tech Anti-Spam Policy, and we're going to click on next. Once again, who do we want protecting? For the purpose of this video, we're just going to protect everybody in the domain. I'm going to click on next. Now when it comes to the anti-spam settings, I don't change an awful lot from the default ones here, but I do like to have my own policy so we can jump in and change if needed. Okay, so we've got lots of settings down here. We won't go through them all. But the first and the most important one is the threshold. So on here, the higher number means the more bulk email will be delivered. So if we set it as 7, we've got 1 to 9. So you can choose again, put it as the default and see what happens in your business. Again, we can then increase the spam score of emails depending on these factors. If there's some image links, we can say, yeah, we want to make sure that gets caught. If there's links to biz or info websites, a lot of things we can configure here. If someone sends an email without anything in it, we can say, well, that's obviously spam. I do tend sensitive words is another thing that you can switch on. SPF hard fail, make sure they get trapped. I do recommend that you probably use the default for the anti-spam inbound and then see how you get on. Monitor it for weeks, months afterwards and make the changes as you see fit. Once you're happy with that, click on next. And then again, we've got the same as the previous policy where we can set our actions. What do we want to happen? All these things here. We can put spam in the subject line. We can do lots of different things. Delete it, quarantine. For spam, I think you better putting these in the junk email folder. If you're an IT department or an IT person, you don't want 20 support tickets every day telling you that you've got something stuck in spam and you've got to release it. You've got to allow users to have some control over it. So spam is just spam. High confidence spam, that is what Microsoft is saying. We're pretty sure this is actually spam, so you might want to do something different with that. Phishing as well, we've said here quarantine. We can select our policy again, and high confidence phishing is phishing that Microsoft is saying we're pretty certain this is phishing. Okay, so you might want to quarantine that one and choose your policy. And then you've got some settings here like how many days do you want to retain spam in quarantine. I would choose 30 for that. The more the merrier, I think. Safety tips, as we discussed before, is a good idea. And this 0-hour auto purge I think is a good feature. If something gets delivered and then Microsoft realise afterwards that actually it's a spam, you can actually pull it out of people's mailboxes. So we can enable that for phishing messages, and we can enable it for spam messages too. It's well worth having on. So click on next. We've got some allow and block lists here, so we can add senders and domains that we use on a regular basis, and we can, once we're happy with all that, we can click on next and create our policy. Okay, that's done. Click on done for that. So we're making good headway. We've got an anti-phishing and an anti-spam policy. So the next thing is the anti-malware policy. Again, we've got these two policies switched off. We're going to create our own. We'll call it JE Tech Anti-Malware Policy. Click on next. Again, who do we want to protect? Our users in that domain. Click on next. So now we've got these file attachments. So what file attachments do we want to basically ban from getting sent? These will get caught. We select these here. So all these will be quarantined. We can add file attachments. You can delete file attachments. Again, depending on your organization, you might have developers who receive certain files with certain attachments, so you might want to delete and add certain attachments into here, and you can do that. Okay, what happens when someone sends an attachment with one of these? What do you want to do? You can reject it. Say to the sender, this has been rejected because we don't like your attachment, or again, we can receive it and we can quarantine it. And then there's this zap setting again, which we've seen before. If something gets through, if Microsoft lets it through and then realizes, oh, actually, this is malware, it can pull it out. So we'll have that. Quarantine policy, we've seen that before, so we'll choose that one. And then we've got some notifications here. So you can notify an admin. So again, you can send an email to the IT department for internal and external senders, and you can use customized text if you want to do that. Okay, I'm not going to do that, but I'll click on next. And that really is the anti-malware policy. That one's nice and easy. And click on done. So the next feature we want to talk about is safe attachments. So what are safe attachments? Well, safe attachments work for attachments that come into email, but they also work with attachments that are in SharePoint, in OneDrive, in Teams. What happens when you receive an attachment? So say if you receive an attachment by email, Microsoft 365 will check that attachment in a secure environment before releasing it on. So as an example, I got an attachment yesterday, and when I first opened it, I saw this message here. So Microsoft 365 was still checking the attachment. Just lasted about 10-15 seconds, and once it had checked the attachment, I was able to open it as normal. So we want to create a safe attachment policy in our 365. So in here you can see again there's the standard and the strict ones. They're both switched off. So I'm going to create our own. I'm going to call it the JE Tech Safe Attachment Policy. Click on next. You're getting used to this by now. So I'm going to put my domain in and I'm going to click on next. Now, as you can see, we've got some various options. Again, it's worth repeating. You can have multiple safe attachment policies that do different things for different people. So the default one is off. So the safe attachment policy is off. The next one is monitor. So it will monitor the attachment coming in, it will deliver it as normal, and it will track results. Not really sure I see the point in that one. The next one is block. So what that will do is it will block the messages with detected malware. The next one is replace. So what it will do, it'll deliver the email, but it will block the attachments. So what's going to happen then is your users are then going to contact you to say, I've had something blocked. Or my personal favorite is the dynamic delivery. So it'll deliver the message, as I just said, without the attachments. If the user tries to open the attachment, they'll see a screen like this. And then after a period of time, the attachment will appear if it's deemed to be okay. Again, quarantine policy, so we'll choose the one that we set earlier. And then we can redirect messages if we want. So we might enable redirect. If a attachment has malware, we can forward it to the IT department or something like that, okay? So I would leave this like this and I will click on next. And that's basically it. So we can submit that and the new safe attachment policy has been created. Once again, we've got some global settings on here, like we've seen earlier, and we can turn on Defender for 365 so it scans attachments in SharePoint, OneDrive and Microsoft Teams. And then we've also got some more advanced features that you need an additional license for. So it's the E5 licensing, okay? So we'll just close that there. The next policy, or should I say the final policy I want to talk about, is safe links. So what are safe links? So the safe links feature, it will scan a URL. So if someone sends you an email and in that email it says, please look at this web page, and the web page says www.bbc.co.uk, Microsoft will scan that URL to make sure that it's not malicious. So it's a really good extra protection because we all include links in our email. And of course, lots of cyber criminals do that with phishing attacks. So it's worth having on. Once again, we go to create the policy. We'll call this JE Tech Safe Links Policy. We'll click on next. Enter our domain. And we'll click on next. And then we've got the settings here. To be honest, I don't usually change anything here either. So we're going to switch the policy on. We're going to apply safe links to email messages sent within the organization. I usually just keep this how it is. We've got the Teams and we've got the Office 365 app. So safe links is working on there as well. Something I do change, we've got some settings here. So track user clicks, let users click through to the original URL. So I usually switch that one off. And then we click on next. We can put a custom notification if you want to do that, but what we're going to do is click on next, just use the default, and again, that's easy enough. So that is our safe links policy which has been created. I'll click on done. Once again, we've got some global settings. So in here we can block certain URLs, so we can go in there and block them, but you can manage a lot of these in which I'm going to show you next. So go down to threat policies, tenant allow block lists. So as you can see here, we've got a lot of things we can block from here. We can block domains, email addresses, URLs, files, spoof senders. So this is where you manage all the allowed and the block lists for your tenant, okay? So that's us done. We've created some policies here for anti-phishing, anti-spam, malware, safe attachments, and safe links. We've also created a quarantine policy. I hope you can see the power of the system and how it will protect your organization. There's just one final thing that I want to show you, and that is the configuration analyzer. So what does this do? Well, the configuration analyzer will check our policies according to the standard recommendations and the strict recommendations offered by Microsoft. So we can see here we've got standard recommendations, which is highlighted, and let's take a couple of examples here. So we've got this here, this is the anti-spam policy. Let's highlight that. So what Microsoft is telling us is a high confidence spam detection action. Our current configuration is to move it to the junk email folder. However, Microsoft recommend that the message is actually quarantined. Okay, so it will go through all our policies and it'll check them according to its standard, or we can go on to strict and it'll give us some recommendations how we can improve our security. Now, you don't have to take these recommendations, it's up to you. But if you want to do that, you can just click on this one here, for example, and we can apply the recommendation. So this is a really useful tool to see how our policies match up against Microsoft recommendations. So that's basically it. That is how to configure Defender for Office 365 Plan 1, which is part of the Business Premium subscription. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video. As you can see, there's a couple of ways that you can configure your Defender for Office 365. An easy way and a slightly harder way. I look forward to seeing you again soon.